I just thought there was one other piece of unfinished business. You said earlier in your discussion, well, what about the Baltics? Well, what about the Baltics? If you could tell us what their prospects are for expanding.
What about the Baltics and what are their prospects? Their prospects are real but more distant. And I think this is me and only me speaking, not speaking for the administration or anyone else in the United States Congress. And I obviously, to state the obvious, I could be dead wrong about this. I think the one place where the greatest consternation would be caused in the short term for admission, having nothing to do with the merit and preparedness of the country to come in, would be to admit the Baltic states now in terms of NATO-Russian, U.S.-Russian relations. And if there was ever anything that was going to tip the balance, were it to be tipped in terms of a vigorous and hostile reaction, I don't mean military, in Russia, it would be that.
I've read Marx, I've read Engels, I've read Das Kapital.
The world is run by Trotskyists.
Hardcore Trotskyists.
How great an anti-American Marxist!
They're controlled by Trotskyists, as you put it, and these are the most evil, sick human beings on the face of the planet.
Most of my contribution will just be I agree, because I've got nothing else today.
That's okay. All right, that's fine. I mean, all we do is talk about this war a lot for the last. Has it been? Is it 2020? It started. I can't remember. Or is it 2021?
22, I think.
22 February
2022.
Yeah. I mean, there was So 2014 to 2020 was the civil war, effectively the proxy war that I did follow, and then when it became a hot war, it's like because a lot of people that annoy me, they think this war started in 2020. It didn't. It started in 2014. It didn't start. It was a slow burn, and then if you kind of point out now, the RCA makes a point, and I agree with them. And others that like NATO countries were kind of picking this fight. They were kind of funding the opposition. But liberals were like, how dare you even accuse that? But like they were. Like it was. It doesn't mean anyone Russia's right to invade. They were wrong too. Like both sides can be bad in this. It doesn't mean like
Yeah.
I
mean, people need to stop getting their politics from the Avengers. How everything's black and white, and you have to have a good and a bad.
Right.
Right.
I
don't know. I just find it simplistic, and I think it needs it's ahistorical as well. It ignores a lot of the buildup to this. Like you said, Chris, history didn't start in 2022. It's the same thing with October 7th. Like Hamas just attacked Israel for no reason, and it just ignores.
It really is the same. You're right. That's a great point.
That's the standard over and over. Even 9/11 as a pivot point was where history ended or began or whatever it is the commentators at the time said. It's the same garbage over and over.
Right. I mean, you could say 9/11 started in 1979 when we started training the Taliban. You could go that far back if you wanted to. You could say 1993 when the first bombings happened. We were like, it's just like it's blowback. A lot of it is the blowback of like we fund these people. And then all of a sudden they take that same training and weaponry and comes back. Oh, how did this happen? 9/11, everything, right?
Yeah, for some reason, funding these like right-wing nut jobs somehow ends up biting us back in the ass. And that's another reason.
Well, and now it's being used as this huge excuse in Europe to just remilitarize everyone. Germany's remilitarizing.
Okay,
and it's like they were waiting for it, like all of it. It's like the DEI stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff that has nothing to do with the federal government. I'm not even changing the subject exactly, but you notice all of these corporations fell in line almost instantaneously, as if they were waiting for it. Oh, this is going to happen, so we're going to roll it out. They're not even part of the federal government, and yet they're doing. And now, parallel, we see Europe starting to arm for war, as if they were, as if a starting gun had gone off.
Right.
Yeah, this is exactly what I was afraid of with all of this is just a proxy war turning into a full-on
world war.
Yeah. And I mean, potentially
let's not be afraid to say
war. Yeah.
Right.
Let's not be afraid to say it.
And, you know, it is a spicy take. I'll admit it, but I'm sorry, but like, you know, Ukraine's not worth nuclear war.
No,
I'm sorry,
and
it's not.
But they really want to go after China.
And I know that's
Right.
that's a hard truth.
It's one of those hard questions, though, Aaron. Like, okay, what started World War I? The assassination of Franz Ferdinand, and it seemed like such a small incident, isolated, but then it dominoed into this entire global thing that dominoed into a second global thing. And seen from our perspective, you know, it all looks nice and laid out, but from the other side, it looks completely innocent. Like, who would go to war, global war, over Franz Ferdinand? Same question, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like, that was like also an imperialist buildup and tensions that were growing, and it was just, you know, massive pile of tinder. And, you know, today with like the worsening of the capitalist crisis and further right wingification of the world, like, you know, like more and more reaction as we enter into this very reactionary period, we're gonna, like, you know, we're gonna see more militarization, more nationalism, and yeah, it's just only gonna make things worse because there is no left alternative. Now, I think we should sort of jumped into it and started talking, but
I think we did.
There is, however, a left opposition.
A
podcast, if you will. Hey.
That'll be our open. All right. Yeah, you're listening to the Opposition Podcast. Chris, Ben, Matthew, and Joe and myself coming at you. It is Thursday, March 13th, 2025. I think we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of the show, actually.
Oh my, wow.
Nice.
Wow.
Very, very nice.
That's great. We made it.
So on the program tonight, I think we're going to try and record 2 episodes again. If you guys are willing to stick around, we're going to talk about bad Ukraine takes. I really want to talk about the assault on free speech, free Mahmoud Khalil, and what a working class response to the tariffs and what is going on, what's happening on like the Canadian side of the border, because I'm sure you guys are curious.
Also, from our viewers, Aaron's from Canada. That's why. So, all right,
don't dox me.
On the ground experience.
So I guess we'll just dive right into it. We don't have a lot of time, but bad Ukraine takes. There's been all sorts of misinformation and misunderstanding, especially of, like, you know, when we say no weapons to Israel. Sorry, well, yes, I mean no weapons to Israel, but
all right, well, correct.
That too.
Freudian slip. Okay, I'm also on like 3 hours sleep. I had a busy night last night. When we say no weapons to Ukraine, are we dooming Ukraine to you know, imperialism, and are we dooming Ukraine to subjugation? You know, I want to cover, like, what do we mean by that when we say no weapons to Ukraine? So, and, you know, does this make us Putin apologists, right?
I've been called that a little bit.
I've been called that too, yeah, by people who just either a bad faith or I'm doing a bad job explaining my position. So that you know, I think I want to take tonight's opportunity to make that clear. So here's where I'm thinking, and you know, feel free to disagree, right? We're not a rigid democratic centrist organization on this podcast. We just generally cover.
We are not an left opposition podcast.
We just generally cover news, and we kind of check out like what Trotskyist organizations have to say. And even they are not all on the same page with this. So that's been interesting too.
Say that again.
So on the one hand, you have, no weapons to Ukraine. Others, you have full, you know, a little bit more sympathy, more sympathetic to Russia. You know, Russia's just a small bean being encircled by NATO imperialism.
Right.
You know, Russia did nothing wrong, apparently.
They're fighting against it. They're an alternative to the American system.
Yes,
and you
that's
get that,
the other stupid take that I can't stand.
Right.
Isn't that the BRICS take?
Yes,
the BRICS take.
the
Yes,
BRICS.
a lot of Marxist-Leninists fall into that trap too. Of like, any opposition to American imperialism is therefore cool and good and must be supported, regardless of who's doing it, regardless of whatever reactionary anti-communist regimes. That is ridiculous. That is pure mechanical understanding of dialectical materialism.
They're like cheering on the military dictatorships in Africa who are kicking out the French.
It is dog shit politics.
Yeah. I think there is truth.
Politics, and you're an idiot if you think that. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think there is truth to the NATO thing. Like, you know, it's not Russia did nothing wrong, but it's America knew what they were doing. And
oh God. That's what I wanted to do. Yeah.
There was a clip of maybe you have it. There was a clip of Biden in like 1997 or something that went around recently, and he was like, the only thing that would turn Russia
He kinda
hostile.
called it.
Yeah. And now he's like, I did NATO, Jack. And it's like, well,
And yeah, like, don't get me wrong. Do I like seeing America, like, being my home country, like getting a bit of a bloody nose after doing this? Like he said, we lost in Iraq. We lost in Afghanistan. We're going to lose in Ukraine. It doesn't make, yeah, cool. Like it's all right. But like, we're just switching in one oppressor for the other. That's all it really is. It's not like, this is like the Soviet Union or say like, I don't know, Cuba. I don't know, like was fighting. If Cuba was fighting a war, an invasion by the Dominican Republic, we'd be cheering on Cuba and we'd be like, yeah, arm Cuba. Who want you? But like, this is not it. Like, this is NATO versus Russia. This is all it really is. And who's going to be fighting and dying? Not the rich people, not the billionaires in Ukraine. They're not going to go out in trenches. It's going to be working class people and poor people who go and fight and die in these wars. Yeah. That's what we're fighting for them. Turn the guns around. That's why we're out there saying no. So please turn. You
notice how the mainstream too, from Vietnam all the way to today, every single perceived mainstream U.S. failure or loss at war is a disaster for the other side, is a disaster for the working class people in every single one of those countries. Countless cities destroyed, villages burned to the ground, over and over and over. Korea itself wasn't an out-and-out victory. There was an armistice, and yet half the country was decimated. So, even though we as communists, celebrate the victories in Vietnam, we also, and all the way up to today, we also recognize the enormous cost of war that happens every single time, whether the U.S. wins or loses.
Right. And someone stands to make a lot of profit off of that death, too. So, that's what the military-industrial complex really is. It's all about making a lot of money. Because Trump may say, oh, we don't want war. He's like, they're actually trying to say, like, he's some kind of peacemaker deal. It's like, he's still going to sell weapons. Like, that's part of the deal. He's going to keep selling them weapons.
It's the most Orwellian garbage I've ever heard.
Well, it's funny, and it only works because conservatives are very stupid. Like, it only works because they only understand, like they have no understanding of it. So they're like, oh, right, there was a war, and Trump said, no war.
That's right. I mean, Biden did arm everybody. That's true. But like, Trump cheers on like the Netanyahu government too. Like, it's not like he's like, he's shipping 2,000-pound bombs so they can keep bombing women and children in Gaza. Like, he's not a peacemaker. Like, imagine if that war gets hot again. He said he'll send in American troops to help out. Like,
to occupy Gaza.
Please.
Yeah. The thing about Trump too is, if you look at like what's going on, right? He's basically just trying to the imperialists want to relocate like resources into Asia to conquer, to push against China and also push against Israel. I mean, the U.S. has massive economic things, but like at the end of the day, it doesn't have unlimited resources. And like, so I was looking it up so far, like the U.S. has given $300 billion in aid in weapons and everything to Ukraine, which is just, and people like wonder like, oh, well, that's fine. Like, cause it's going to Ukraine, but it's like, if the stuff that Trump's doing now, like demanding these mineral rights and all this stuff, that's a result of that. He's even saying like, we need to get something back for our investment, right? Like, so it's like, yeah, Ukraine's going to have to keep selling off its sovereignty and selling off everything, which is ironic because that's what exactly the apologists for this war are saying that Ukraine's doing, is maintaining its sovereignty through staying in the war. But it's really they're just setting themselves up to be used as this proxy ram to weaken Russia. As many Russians that can get like dragged down and killed. It's like, oh, that's worth it. Because, like you said, it's not their kids that are fucking doing the fighting. It's these 4 Ukrainian kids and shit.
Yeah, right, Ukrainian kids are being kidnapped off the street and like forced to the front line. There was a division recently that was funded and armed by NATO and trained. They got to the front lines, and I think out of 2,500 troops that got sent, 1,700.
Oh, the 155th. That, oh god, yeah,
1,700 defected out of 2,500.
Oh my gosh,
they just left.
Right.
They just
right.
And I remember at the beginning of the war, you were seeing like Stinger missiles like on Craigslist. Like people they sell the equipment and get the hell out of there because like they don't want to fight.
I'm not kidding. You want me to see? I'll show you. I have 3 of them. Buy 2, get 1 free. So if I want to take out like I
love
tank,
your country.
I know, it's great. It's in the Second Amendment. That's why we put the American Revolution. So in case some smart ass cop in a tank shows up, I could use a javelin / Stinger missile. It's a jumble bag, like the bargain bin at like the CD store. That's how old I am, the CD store. But like, yeah, it was a jumble bin. But I just want to piggyback a bit on Ben's point too. It's kind of like, and this is from the RCA. They wrote a good piece. I think it's called what's the name of the article?
The last drop of Ukrainian blood. I have it open
Yeah,
here
so
somewhere.
it was a very good article. And I like this because they drew an analogy between the Battle of Stalingrad. So for all you World War II nerds out there, after the Battle of Stalingrad, the German High Command, OKM, they knew the war was pretty much they couldn't win. It was over. They spent the best in that was the tipping point, and the war started ever since then. And it took 2 more years for the war to finally end, even though the war was already over. And with Ukraine, militarily, they're not going to win this. It's quite clear. If you follow this daily, I know we thought the counteroffensive that was at the last summer. Oh, the counteroffensive is going to do it. They went into Kursk, and that was going to be a big deal. Oh, here comes Kursk. They made it's not happening. Kursk has pretty much been completely taken over. Thousands of them are surrendering over this because they can't win. Russia knows they're big enough. They have enough weapons. They make their own weapons at home. They can just slowly grind it all out. And the speed of which it's been going has been increasing. Lately, maybe the last month, it kind of slowed down, but they are slowly doing this war of attrition, and Russia's going to win. Ukraine can't find enough people. On the flip side, Russia has been paying the soldiers a lot more. They've been having a boom, which is you think would be all those sanctions that have been going on, but their sanctions have not been. There's like 16 sanctions are going. There's another one this week, as if
Russia's the most sanctioned.
16.
They're the most sanctioned country in the world, and yet their GDP is up, their wages are up,
right.
Infrastructure is getting built. They're just expanding eastward towards China. Like
they're independent.
We covered this on our last episode. No, they don't. They actually don't need Europe, and I think Europe needs Russia far more.
Well, they do a lot of trade with China, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yep. Iran and North Korea, and now Iran and North Korea, who have very big military alliance. Now they have a military strategic thing. North Korea had a ton of artillery shells because Russia needed them, so that was a boost of that. Iran had drone technology, gave these are the isolated countries are getting together. That is happening without them. Sanctions work like on Venezuela, Cuba, and I mean, I'll put this way, Cuba's been 60 years and they still haven't folded, but sanctions work on small, predominantly more capitalist economies because, they can shut your trade off. If Venezuela's their main export's oil, you can fuck with the oil industry, they're going to be in trouble. But Russia's just gigantic. And it's got lots of different industries, and like they said, they had a snag in the beginning, but not anymore. The soldier pay they're getting 30,000 volunteers a month to Russia, to go sign up and everything. The money is insanely good for them. It's way more than working a regular job. And I think, as one of you guys pointed out earlier, is that Ukraine is they're going on kidnapping people to go fight. And there's another policy too, because Ukraine is a very corrupt government. It was a corrupt government before Zelensky. I'm not saying, but they had the situation where if you didn't want to go to the front, you had to pay your commanding officer a bribe monthly if you don't want to go to the front. And if you couldn't make that bribe anymore, guess where you're going? To the front.
Well, on that point too, you have to remember in the biggest context, like the widest context, like look back to 1989 when the Soviet Union collapsed. You end up with Ukraine and Russia, and both of these countries have been on the same trajectory. Like their post-Soviet politics and economy and everything are extremely similar. And yeah, it's really just it's a very corrupt gang of oligarchs in both countries that essentially dominate everything.
Yeah. I'm thinking too. And also, about the military aspect too. Russia's military is going to come out of this war stronger and bigger, more battle hardened. They've gotten a lot better. Remember the first few months they made an advance, then Ukraine came in with a strong counteroffensive and kind of whooped them and everything. They learned a lot since then. Mm-hmm. So now they're going to have a much bigger, modernized army out there, that knows how to fight and can fight. Meanwhile, what NATO's trying to keep, but the EU is trying to when they were oh, we'll send troops. No one was going to send, England said, they made this problem. Oh, we're going to send troops as long as America does, which that wasn't going to happen at all. And the standing army of the UK is only 70,000 people. That's it. And they sent 30,000. That's almost half. And most of those are officers. They're not soldiers. So UK is not going to do anything. France is the only one that maybe could do it. But as that story about the 155th brigade that was trained in France. The Ukrainian, I mean, even the Ukrainians are defecting. Like, they know it's a death sentence to go to the front right now. The best and the brightest are getting killed. I mean, it's just people who don't really want to fight because they know they're going to get killed pretty quick.
I mean,
That's
like
it.
nothing triggers class struggle like conscription too. And actually, we're seeing that in Russia. They're making a call for they're looking for like 133,000 conscripts to join. One of my coworkers barely speaks English. He's Russian, and he came to Canada last fall because that's when the draft went in, and he's like, fuck that.
Yeah.
Not my problem. Lovely guy. Can barely. He has almost no English, but like that's what someone else told me about him, was like, yeah, he wanted nothing to do with this, so he came to Canada and just started digging as an archaeologist.
Good.
It's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
Honestly, no, draft dodgers, no matter where you are in the world, like, you have my utmost respect. And, you know, people, again, liberals like to bag on Trump for being a draft dodger, but I'm like, no, like, that's actually the most base thing he's ever done.
Yeah.
Like, of course you dodged the
Didn't go
draft.
to Vietnam.
What are you, stupid?
Good.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Who the
Come on.
fuck wanted to go to Vietnam? Like, I mean, one of my professors, he was a Vietnam vet, and it was like during the Iraq War time, and they're like, oh, well, George W. Bush went AWOL, and he goes, let me just stop you there. I was down there for Tet. That was my first month, which was the Tet offensive. I don't give any, I don't share, I do not look down on anyone who did not want to go to this war. I don't blame anybody. People wanted to get out, good for that, and I was surprised by him, but he's like, no one wanted this war. It was unpopular, and it's okay. I don't fault him for that. I was just like, oh shit, all right, that was surprising, but
you know, if you think of it from the larger point of view, draft dodging and prosecution of that is a reactionary outlook. You know, nowhere was that more trumpeted than during the Clinton administrations. You know, oh, he was a draft dodger. Why do we? You know, we don't need that guy in there. We need someone like Bush. We need someone like Reagan. You know, they loved pumping that over and over and over, and they had no problem of flipping it and saying that Kerry was a traitor, even though he like served doing swift boat stuff. I don't know. I forget. All I can remember is, you know, the attacks from the conservatives.
Yeah, he did win. What was it? 3 Purple Hearts. He just kept getting hurt.
But we have to listen to old bone spurs here.
I prefer the ones that didn't get hurt.
Okay, so I just real quick, another reason why we should oppose Russian military involvement. Like, again, like, I don't want anyone to mistake us in thinking like we're justifying this war, because like we talk a lot about NATO and the very clear provocation, and the American ruling class also very clear in their provocation. We have a clip of Biden talking about it. Here's a clip of.
But remember, the Russians invaded Afghanistan back in 1980. And although no country went in, they certainly had a lot of countries supplying arms and advice, and even some advisors to those who were recruited to fight Russia. It didn't end well for the Russians. There were other unintended consequences, as we know, but the fact is that a very motivated and then funded and armed insurgency basically drove the Russians out of Afghanistan. Obviously, the similarities are not ones that you should bank on, because the terrain, the development in urban areas, et cetera, is so different. But I think that is the model that people are now looking toward. We have to watch this carefully. We have to provide sufficient military armaments for the Ukraine military and volunteers.
So we oppose Russian military involvement because this is a war to expand Russian capitalism and reassert power and influence for its own purposes. And they have a history of doing this when they, you know, after the fall of the Soviet Union, they went to war with Georgia. Georgia was also funded and trained and armed by NATO. They backed Lukashenko in Belarus, right? And I think most egregious of all, and I think, you know, this is where I butt heads with a lot of like Marxist-Leninists online, is the general strike in Kazakhstan a couple years ago. I don't know if you guys remember that. They drove the government out of the country, and they were in the midst of actually forming workers' councils when Russia intervened militarily and put the whole thing down and reinstated the Kazakh government.
We kind of forget about that. Yeah,
and
I know. That was
well, they'll say it was a color revolution. It was all CIA, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, the gray zone. Yes, gray zone was saying that. I remember.
Oh, God.
So any socialist who supports Russia or any Western dickhead who thinks that Russia is still the Soviet Union, deeply unserious clown, because and it's because of this, we don't support Russia's military and economic expansion into Eastern Europe. But I will say also, they probably learn from the best. This is how America treats this is how the United States treats Latin America, right? This is exactly how they do it. And granted, the scale of Russian imperialism is nowhere near that of the United States, right? Like orders of magnitude, like not the same. Right. But again, the relationship to the means of production are the same. And even though Ukraine has, a lot of problems with Nazis and far right nationalism, that is also a result of these, inter-imperialist rivalries and minglings. Let's not forget, America was more than willing to see a fascist Germany take over Europe so they can keep selling weapons to the UK to fight them. And it was only until Germany started to threaten American imperialism that they feel the need to intervene, right? So Ukraine workers need to understand too that they are being sent to the slaughter to weaken Russia in order to isolate China. So until recently, there was no talk of American or European boots on the ground engaging in actual combat against Russia. Ukraine was being they were given just enough weapons to keep the war going. With the West interfering in potential peace talks early on, I remember Boris Johnson said, "No, we're not ready." It was a month into the war, and Boris Johnson stepped in, and he was like, "No, we're not ready for peace talks yet."
We're not,
which is ironic too.
Ukraine's like, what the fuck?
No, but if you think about it, remember how disastrous the Russian attack on Kiev was? Like that would have been a really strong time for Ukraine.
Perfect time.
Yep. We just routed your freaking attack on our capital, and now let's make a deal, But yeah, you're right. The U.S. and the EU was like, hell no.
Game on.
Yeah.
So, but Trump is a moron and a buffoon, but Trump recognizes power and he recognizes strong men, right? And that's one of the reasons why he loves Putin.
Strong men.
Whether or not he's in Putin's pocket, I don't know about that. I think that's more Russia gate liberal claptrap about blaming Russia for losing a very winnable election twice in a row. I don't know.
Best election ever seen.
I don't know if I buy into that, but Trump isn't stupid enough. Trump realizes that the war in Ukraine is lost. A defeat of Russia in Ukraine is not possible without a mass influx of American troops, which Trump doesn't want to do. He ran as the isolationist president, so-called, and this will put us a step closer to World War III, possibly even nuclear war. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, I'm sorry, but I don't think Ukraine is worth that risk.
Yeah.
The Russian ruling class have been very clear in their objectives: neutrality for Ukraine towards NATO, towards the EU, and abide by the Minsk agreements. And not a single one has come forward and demanded that they invade all of Europe. I think that's just more fear mongering. I don't think Russia does not have the capability of invading all of Europe.
Look how long it took them to get. They can't even get the Donbass after 3 years. They can't even take Kiev. Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, not Kiev, Donbass. No. It's still all. Most of it, but not all of it.
It's still disputed territory. Yeah.
Right.
Now, a question I have about Ukraine and Russia ultimately is Russia, and I'm asking this also for the audience's sake, but is Russia Russia is a newer capitalist country, since the USSR fell, and in order to build a more robust market at home, it needs, I don't know any, but it needs, colonial possessions from which resources are to be pulled, lower wages for the workers in the colonies and whatnot. It looks like Russia is. It looks like Russia, to me at least, is reaching for an imperial status that it doesn't have yet. And that's, I think, one of the central questions among different Marxist organizations as to the nature of Russia right now and what it's doing with Ukraine and whatnot. I think it's worth talking about because I'm not even sure where the definition should fall. Is Russia imperialist right now? Is it not? Is it reaching for it? And what are the implications for Ukraine if it loses? And Aaron, you mentioned a couple points there about what Russia expects of Ukraine. What do you think?
Oh, is Russia imperialist? Now, how much time do we have? This could be a long chat. It's a great chat, I mean, good God. I mean, I would say Russia isn't imperialist. I don't think they've developed their economic forces enough to really, I don't think they're in the monopoly capitalism kind of phase. Like, I don't see it. But it's obviously it's aspirations to be an imperial power. I think you were right. I think they're aiming to be that. I think, Ukraine is a good neo-colonial project because what was the Euromaidan after Euromaidan in 2014 when they overthrew the government there? They went from a pro-Russian to just now a pro-Western one. They just changed. Like, it's kind of like I think we read with George what's that Wretched of the Earth. I think they're just changing. Kenya had the revolution and like they got their own thing. They just went back to the British anyway. It's like they're gonna be a proxy state because one thing is like the rare earth elements that's been talked about. How Trump is so rude. How dare he demand the natural resources? The economists call him an imperialist, which is ironic because every president's one. Yeah. But like when BlackRock, it was the last year when BlackRock and Joe Biden were like, yeah, we're gonna have BlackRock rebuild your economy for you and everything. That's imperialism too. Like it's just Trump was more honest about it. That's the only thing. Like it sounded nice that's all it is. Like, but Russia, like I said, they're just competing over the rare earth element. Most of it's under Russian territory. The new, is in the Donbass. That's the mineral resource area that they're got. So
well, half of it is under Russian control right now, and then the other half, Zelensky already promised 99-year lease to the UK. So I don't know if Trump's going to be able to get those minerals anyway.
Right. See. Like that's really what it is, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's a good point. Like I know there was the Denver Communists, I think, or a Firebrand. That was a great conversation. There were some people who very much had opinions, and it kind of devolved into some really crazy conversation. But it's a good conversation the left has to have with itself, I think. But what do you all think? I think Russia isn't imperialist, but aspiring.
I would argue that they are imperialist. There's massive monopolies and domination of banking sectors inside the country. They have lots of fingers in the pies in like Africa, for instance. They are extracting resources there. I had a whole fucking document that I wrote about imperialism in Russia.
That's interesting. I didn't know they had that stuff.
It's not, again, it's
we could do a whole episode about this,
We should. I know.
Not a bad idea.
Because I know like Firebrand and folks from Left Voice, both of them had some really strong arguments one way or the other. Like I said, that was a public, we all went to that public meeting, right? Or it was on Zoom last I don't know how long ago, but that was a good one. I would like to bring those people on again because that conversation was spicy and it was good. Like it should be. Maybe not the people who are the blue and white tankies. Maybe we know their take, but
the big takeaway for me from this conversation, first of all, is that being able to lay out the evidence for or against with the particularities involved. Aaron, you said you had some things written on what's going on in their banking and their economic sector that and whatnot. That needs to be part of the conversation.
Yep. I got a comment from the chat here too, and this is also nothing too. From Redbox 5. Either that, or they have significant ethnic populations that have been brutally oppressed by the current regime in Kiev. That is true. You have the Azov Battalion doing we saw some of the stuff they were like doing like purges of certain ethnic groups, tying people up, painting them green, leaving them at lampposts and stuff. That does play a part of it too. Like there was some. I know we call them ultra nationalists, but I'll use the old term for them, fascists, that we are arming. And also, the United States is arming an openly fascist battalion, which I have a problem with. Call me old-fashioned. I don't think we should be giving Nazis weapons. Welcome to the Left Opposition Podcast, where we oppose giving Nazis government-made weapons and training.
Not to mention on the other side of it, who in their right mind, what moron would advocate for Trump giving weapons to anybody of any kind?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Coming from Trump.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem with both fucking parties agreeing on all this foreign policy shit in America.
Yeah.
Like, I've mentioned my dad a couple of times, and I always think of him because I'm like, why do you hate Republicans again? Like you
guys
seem to
agree
like
so much.
I like to call him domestically he's Bernie Sanders, and foreign policy he's Adolf Hitler. It's like there's a lot of that, I think.
You do, but like that's common, really. You do have that. Like I have people I work with, like they want single payer healthcare, they want free college tuition, but like they want to give Zelensky nukes, and it's like, wow, like okay, nukes. That could be an issue, I think. Maybe.
Well, that's an interesting thought because they're always fucking crowing about North Korea and Iran having nukes. And it's like, why do you want Ukraine to have nukes? Oh, so Russia doesn't nuke them. Oh, really? Is that why?
Wow. It's almost like it's a deterrent from being invaded. Weird. I mean, look how well that worked out for Libya and Gaddafi when they give up their nuclear program. Yeah. Oh, wait. Yeah.
Didn't we state way back years ago, didn't we station nukes in Turkey or something like that? As part of containment policy
during the Cold War, and that was actually when the Cuban Missile Crisis, like they talked through that and they ended the crisis. That was the Soviets' precondition for the removal of the nuclear missiles from Cuba, was the U.S. removing their nuclear missiles from Turkey.
Yeah, because we did it first.
Yeah,
also,
exactly.
I want to point out too, Cupcakes are too. Oh, remember when NATO brought democracy to Libya, and now they have quote open air slave markets in Libya. It's not like NATO has a good track record. Like I think once again we kind of forget the mess that NATO leaves behind. Open air slave markets. We're not doing
Iraq,
well.
Afghanistan, Yugoslavia,
right,
Libya. Anywhere where the U.S. exports weapons, it has never ended well. It has never been for a progressive cause. There is no.
I'm trying to think. I'm not kidding. I can't.
It's not. It is not a national liberation struggle, and that's why we oppose weapons to Ukraine.
Yeah.
If this was a national liberation struggle, like with Palestine. That's a national liberation struggle, right? And that is resistance.
If NATO wants to send weapons to like the people of Gaza, I'll change my. Okay, NATO, here's your chance. You said the Palestinians
I think I might
bigger
oppose
missiles
that.
and javelins, baby, and you start popping off some of those Makarova tanks. I'm on board with NATO. All right, I'll say it here first in the Left Opposition podcast. Send some javelins to them to take on a Makarova tank. I'll change everything.
I swear, if they do that, Chris, you're gonna have a field day.
I'll do my emergency podcast. NATO switches sides, joins the sides of good to take down the Palestinian cause. Who knew?
NATO will dissolve before they ever do that.
They'll nuke themselves before that happens.
It's a great point though, because
they're nuking Germany right now.
It's a great point because you have to really believe that NATO is capable of being a progressive force. Like the U.S. is, U.S. imperialism has, in order to believe that this is going to be beneficial, it's the elephant in the room that they don't want to acknowledge, is that you're saying that the U.S. foreign policy is progressive.
Right. It sounds nice on paper. Granted, you could make the argument. I was younger after 9/11 and everything, but any government that wasn't the Taliban in Afghanistan was nominally progressive. Yes, the condition of women improved, without the Taliban, but who do you think put the Taliban in power? Who do you think gave them the training and all the weaponry? And then when they kicked out the Soviets, they went, good luck, whoever's in charge. Oh, the Taliban, great. Oh, can we make a Unical pipeline through Afghanistan? Oh, that's fine. But they'll do business with any repressive government until they bite the hand that feeds them. It's just if you're paying attention, how do you think any of the Democrats or Republicans give a shit about peace and progressive values? They don't. God damn. But yeah.
This is the coolest graphic ever. Is Russia imperialist? And they've got this laser thing.
Put it on the screen for our Twitch fans there.
It's very futuristic.
It's
a little ACP level. I don't know. I'm already cringing a little bit. I get some ACP vibes. But okay, we're gonna take back the laser beams. That's fine.
Yeah, so I wrote a summary of this article, and that's what I was trying to find.
You wrote this into? Oh,
no,
wow.
I wrote a summary of this article. This is Paulette Sturm, the very anti-Trotskyist, very hardcore Marxist-Leninist group. But I think they got the question right here.
Okay.
Sometimes they do publish good stuff.
What was their conclusion?
I like their name, Politsturm. It's very German. I love it.
I love Rammstein. Great band. So it's conclusion. Russia is an imperialist state. Oh. Well,
okay. Well, there you go.
Well,
that settles that.
I saved myself 15 minutes.
That's all we need. It's just the one liner.
Yep. Okay.
Literally jumping to conclusions.
All right. Wow.
Anyway, yeah, highly recommend you check that article out. We can post that in the show notes. Feel free to disagree. I don't.
That's fine. Yeah, like I said,
I think that's where I am too. I think I would agree with that. I feel like Russia is imperialist.
Like remember like the Tsarist Russia, Lenin considered imperialist, even though they did not export finance capital, but they were considered a prison house of nations, and they had a big army and they could just take territory, and that's
right.
And Russia inherited one of the largest armies in the world after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and they have the largest nuclear arsenal in the world.
Right. But are they exporting finance capital? I know there's I don't see Russian banks.
Chris, Doug comes out on the side that Russia is not imperialist yet, but he's much more eloquent, especially on that point, exporting finance capital, the whole bit. And I need to catch up on that reading. So
I know I think our next episode should be that. I think we all know Doug, Left Voice, and Fire. Like that was, like I said, that was a great conversation, because let's have it. Like, it's a debate. Obviously, like, America is imperialist. Is
this a Fall of Eagles?
Yes, I think Patrick Stewart as Lenin in Fall of Eagles just puts
so
it very
good. It's
very
so
succinct.
We don't have enough Patrick Stewart references. Me too.
Obviously, this is not a academic or Marxist source, but it's such a fantastic line.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
and Patrick Stewart's in it.
Any war undertaken by a capitalist government is imperialism. Hasn't the clown read any books?
That's the line. Any war undertaken by a capitalist government is imperialism.
And hasn't the clown read any books is pretty good too.
I mean, I like that. That's well done.
I love that movie. I don't think I've ever watched it all the way through, but every time I see clips, it's just magic.
I started it. It's pretty cool.
Was like Lennon explicitly say something like that, or is that like, I know this is a movie, but like, did he actually say something like that? Because I'm now thinking of, like, say when
it's complicated. It's complicated. Because, well, the thing is, whenever he's talking about things like determination, or he's talking about imperialism, it's always in the context of the particular issue. And you go back to that era, when he, for instance, when he's talking about self-determination, he's not just talking about it as an empty, abstract universal. He's talking about it in the context of, is the country pre or post feudal emerging capitalist? Russia was not yet at the time,
very late
post-feudal capitalist. Austria was 1867, I believe, was the year, and he compares the two in his text on addressed to Rosa Luxemburg on the question of self-determination and all of that stuff. So it's never as simple as, you look through Lenin's works and you find the definition on this. It's always in the context of a particular problem that he's trying to argue for or against, and it's a very they're all concrete questions. They're almost never abstract. They're almost never out of context. And so you actually have to study the history involved, as well as, the metaphysical question of what is self-determination? What is this? What is that? He addresses the metaphysical question, but also the context, and the two are always linked. So, yeah, there's no easy answer. And I'm sure this article, as Aaron said, he's already summarized it, tries to look at it in that way. I can't wait to read it myself. So thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, definitely. Because, like, I'd say China's imperialist with their over finance capital going over the world and everything. I would say they're more, what they're doing in Africa, putting out financial things, developing parts in Africa, seizing ports because you couldn't make payments. That's more. I don't see Russia. I'm not saying Russia would never do that. I'm just saying I don't see it happening yet. I think the word is yet. I think for, they're moving that way. And I think once again, Redbox, loving your comments, but the Tsar was working with British and French imperial. Like I said, it was a team effort with that too. It was more combined, and a lot of French investment and English investment. I think when in 10 Days That Shook the World, I think Lenin was almost mocking, like, hey, it looks like the French want their investment back from all the streetcars they made. Are we going to give them any payments? No.
Well,
Looks like
that's
Belgium,
another
like, that was it. Like,
Chris, that's another good angle to this, because if the U.S. is slapping sanctions on Russia, slapping sanctions on China to stop them from taking cross-border capital investment schemes, whatever they're doing, that's another sign that the country is obviously trying to put out feelers to become more, I guess you could use the word imperialist with its finance capital and whatnot. And and the fact that Russia can do with or without it, honestly, I would almost say the same. Okay, I'm going to say something controversial right off the cuff. But
all right.
It almost makes me wonder if all of the sanctions on Russia from the fall of the USSR to today wasn't part of the cause of the Ukraine conflict. Because if you recall, and this is real loose, but you remember that the Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor was because of sanctions on oil and rubber during the 40s from the U.S. and its allies, and how that provoked a violent response from Japan. It makes me think, it makes me just speculate that, it might
no,
be
that's...
No, I think it's a good point. Like, there was a lot of infrastructure inherited from the USSR. Ukraine had pipelines going directly from
Ukraine
Russia
is the breadbasket of Eastern Europe and has been for a long time.
Europe, and Ukraine wanted to start charging, import fees to have the gas go through their thing, and so that's why the Nord Stream 2 pipeline got built, and then eventually got blown up. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we have almost a full episode on just Ukraine. I think we talked a good 45 minutes on that. Is there anything else you guys want to say on Ukraine?
I got more, babe. Oh, we could do the whole thing on it.
All I really want to say on this really is that this is an ongoing conversation. We're not going to come to any definitive answers, even for our audience. The message from us, if anything, is keep reading, keep studying this, and sort of get smarter about this, because we all are doing that as Marxists and as radicals, and that's what we need is to be smarter and be able to plan for when all of this, it's already going on. So not just become smarter, but do something with it.
I agree. I think that every Marxist should be having these conversations with their comrades in their circles, and trying to reach to analyze it and reach the truth of the situation. I wanted to make two quick points before we switch topics. The first one I want to make
lots of time to just go.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the first one is just that, I think we should be pretty clear that we are not supportive of Russia's annexation of the territories in Ukraine. I think that should be
absolutely not.
We should be explicit about. The other point was actually just a point about the rare minerals, just some statistics I found. Did you know that, I guess in the 1990s, lithium, a ton of lithium would cost you $1,500. In 2025, a ton of lithium would cost you $20,000. And so it just to show how much how important these rare metals and everything, these mineral rights and everything, it's a lot of value in terms of
huge market.
It's a massive market. And so we talked about Ukraine, where the minerals are. There's a very large section of deposits of minerals, of these types of minerals, in the Donbass. You're 100% right about that. There also is another very large one in more central Ukraine. And so it's not even a small, I don't think it's a stretch to think that would probably be part of the reason for Russia's desire to annex these territories. I mean, they have a lot of mineral wealth in Ukraine.
Yep.
I just want to say that too. And I read another article mentioned about Ukraine. So Ukraine has lost 25% of its GDP. It is going to take a decade at least to get them probably back to where they were before the war. I'm assuming the loss of life, all of those young people who are like that, a generation might have just been slaughtered off, probably, in this whole war. They lost educated workers, they lost skilled workers, a lot of people, and that's just a lot of people have fled. But yeah, I think the rare earth elements, I think if they're going to be developed, I don't think Ukraine on their own lacks the technicians and the machinery and the workers to extract that money in the first, like they won't, they can't. Like I don't see that happening. So I see they would have to turn. I think that what you guys saying about British imperialism. Oh, we got the skilled workers and everything you need. We'll come in and help you.
Yeah. In any case, they're going to be an adjunct. Right. It's already those dominoes have already fallen.
And BlackRock is the guy in the yellow jacket leaning up behind a tree. BlackRock's already got their sights set on.
And if you listen to what
culture reference,
if you listen to what Trump is saying too, like he's saying that like, oh, me and Russia will talk and make a deal. They're basically pushing Ukraine out of the peace talks on Ukraine, and it's like me and Russia will figure this out. It's the carving up of Ukraine for
I mean that's the quiet part loud is like, well, Ukraine is going to be one of our properties, so let's just split it.
Yeah, it's like Gaza. It's
that's the essence of what he's doing.
Beachfront property, baby.
Now Trump's even threatening the EU over it.
It's how Trump thinks everything is in terms of deals, right? Like,
right.
Right.
Oh, he's such a moron.
One thing I'll just say this too, because one thing too is we didn't really talk about it. What does this mean for the Zelensky government? Right. So this is a troubling thing. For America, that means a lot of EU, for America, if Trump does everything, we're not going to do it. Let the EU worry about it. That's a huge financial drain off the United States. That's coming off the books. If anything, they'll sell more weapons hopefully they'll sell weapons to the EU and Ukraine, make some money off of it for the military industrial complex. That's good. But I'm thinking Zelensky, there might be a coup d'etat. Zelensky and all these people who were backing it, I would say you might want to get the hell out of the area if this is going badly, because your fate is going to be it's like DM in South Vietnam. I really think if this war is going to go badly, I think Zelensky gets killed. That's just my take on it, but the days are numbered.
There might even be a civil war. If Russia doesn't want to fight, then they might fight Russia-friendly Ukrainians from the east. I don't think Zelensky's gonna last long. Even if democracy does open up again. I know I was wrong. Sorry, Facebook friends. I was wrong about Zelensky canceling elections. Apparently, in wartime, the Constitution cancels elections. What you didn't have to do was suppress your oppositional parties, arrest anti-war activists, make communists
and ban the communist and socialist parties.
Drive them all in underground. And basically block any mass media that might be reporting the truth on the ground. You didn't have to do that. And so when Zelensky goes on Letterman and Letterman's like, you're defending democracy, and I'm like, what democracy are you talking about here? I know it's insulting.
It's the democracy of neoliberalism that has just gone wild in Eastern Europe.
And we're seeing the death knell. We're seeing the death knell of neoliberalism. I think it's run its course, and it's a scary time ahead. And I think we're entering into a period of reaction, and now more than ever is the time to start organizing your workplace and start building the worker struggle, because there's going to be no one left to push back against these monsters when imperialism comes home to roost.
And I heard
a poem about that once.
I would just say that
Sleepy Joe, you okay there, Joe?
Yeah, I'm really tough.
You were saying something?
I lost my point. Don't worry about it.
Okay. All right. But because I see the, EU, we don't forget, France tried to join BRICS, France might be going, I see them, some might go.
Russia tried to join NATO in the 90s.
Right.
Things can get crazy.
Right. So, I see Poland did sign up for the Silk Road Initiative. Remember that? They have some infrastructure from China coming. It's interesting where this is going to go, because the old order of Europe it's coming to an end. If they can't unify on this whole thing, that goes the so-called, rules-based order kind of thing of Washington.
Wasn't that a neocon talking point back in the old Bush years? I forget his name, but he
Which Bush, Daddy Bush or W? Which one?
George W. Bush. He one of his Yeah, one of his advisors said something about old Europe. Was it Rumsfeld? I think it was
her or Condoleezza Rice, one of them. Yes, old Europe versus new
old
Europe.
Europe versus new Europe, and the whole thing. And I mean, the echoes, 20 years later, are almost uncanny, actually.
I know. I'd love to go back and watch some stuff. I know it's wild to think that she made fun of the No 9 Yet, like Germany, Russia, and France both opposed the Iraq War. Now look where we all are with all three of those countries now. Huh?
Yep. Yeah.
You know, one day, the whole of Europe will be one vast socialist state. Russia, Germany, France, even England. But there will be one place where life will go on just as it always has done. Right here in Switzerland! But it won't happen in our lifetime.
If you stay here any longer, Volodya, you'll become a bourgeois farmer and settle down breeding cows.
I haven't spent 30 years fighting for the revolution all over Europe in order to settle down in this miserable country.
I was just making a joke.
Have you read Kerensky's speech?
I'm just doing so.
The man is a lunatic.
The socialist parties of the Allied powers would be failing in their patriotic duty to their respective countries were they, in this present conflict, to engage in any revolutionary activity which might jeopardize their country's efforts to continue the war against German imperialism.
Any war undertaken by a capitalist government is imperialism. Hasn't the clown read any books?
He is a lawyer